I'm here today with Kathleen Norris. Kathleen is the award-winning poet, writer, and author of the New York Times bestsellers The Cloister Walk, A CD and Me, A Marriage, Monks, and a Writer's Life, Dakota, A Spiritual Geography, Amazing Grace, The Vocabulary of Faith, and The Virgin of Bennington. Exploring the spiritual life, her work is at once intimate and historical, rich in poetry and meditations, brimming with exasperation and reverence, deeply grounded in both nature and spirit, and sometimes funny, and often provocative. So Kathleen, for many years, was also the poetry editor for Spirituality and Health magazine, and is currently editorial advisor to Give Us This Day. She's also been involved with Writing for Your Life for quite some time, has spoken at our conferences, and we're really glad, Kathleen, to have you with us here today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So maybe we could just get started by having you talk a little bit about your view on the state of the country at this point.
Well, you know, I know enough about American history not to be totally panicked, because we've certainly been through very difficult times before in our history. And if anything, you know, people complain about how nasty political cartoons are. It always makes me laugh, because you look at the stuff from the 1900s, they're much worse. They're savage, really savage. So, you know, I have some perspective on it, but at the same time, I think in my lifetime, at least, we're facing the most serious threat to our democracy that I've ever seen, in terms of threats to our separation of church and state, separation of powers, legislative, judicial, executive, and threats to so many things that are enshrined in our Constitution, like the Postal Service. And so that bothers me a lot, because I think it can get worse, and I think it will get worse if Donald Trump is reelected. So that's my big concern. And I think, you know, when you look at the terrible rioting that's taken place in so many, you know, fairly small cities like Portland and Kenosha, you know, at this rioting, I think a lot of it is a pent-up anger over, you know, the shooting of unarmed Black people, which is, has to be addressed, has to be dealt with. It's just, it shouldn't be happening, and it's been happening for too long. So there's that, but I also think a lot of it is pent-up anger over the pandemic, that people are just so frustrated right now over all kinds of things, and it's taking this form of, unfortunately, this form of violence. So it disturbs me. But again, I lived through the 60s, and we had people blowing up labs at universities. We had bombings. We had all kinds of violence in the 60s, and we came through that okay. So it's a troubling time, but my hope is that we can get through this.
So I know personally, at least, I've never seen our country this polarized. And so it makes it very difficult to have conversations about many important topics. What ways have you found to be most effective in speaking about the election or about all the different issues that we have with people who don't necessarily share your views?
It's hard, and I think the country was extremely polarized also in the 1960s with the Vietnam War, with all the demonstrating, and, you know, if you had long hair, you know, you were seen as a threat to the nation. I mean, those kinds of things. I think we were very polarized then. I think it is worse now, partly because we have a president who seems to want to stir up even more polarization. I mean, so much of what he says serves to keep people afraid and angry, and on both sides of the spectrum. But you know, that seems to be his how he operates. And like a lot of people who want to be autocratic leaders, keeping people afraid and angry is a good thing, because it keeps you in power. It makes people say, well, I have to trust him because I have no alternative. You know, I have a kind of a unique, interesting, for me, it's an interesting perspective, because I know a lot of people in the little town in western South Dakota where I lived for so many years, my mom's hometown, who voted for Trump in 2016 and are likely to vote for him again. And I have had, not this year, but last year, I did have some conversations with people about that. And I knew they had voted for him. I knew they believed in him. Some of it was it's this gut thing about just never voting for a Democrat ever. I mean, that's just, they can't see themselves doing that. But like one conversation I thought was revealing, it was a young woman who's, she and her husband farm, and you know, I brought up the subject of, well, what do you think about how Trump is with farmers like you? And she said, well, we're doing okay. And this was at a time, and she didn't really want to go into it because she knew my sister and I were both there, and she knew that we're not Trump supporters. We didn't talk about it, but she knew that. And this was at a time when soybean farmers and dairy farmers were in the news because there were so many of them were being driven to bankruptcy and suicide, and there were all kinds of things in the news. But these were people who were in the much farther east. They were in other states like Wisconsin and Ohio and Indiana. And the feeling was that she felt that Donald Trump had been good for farmers like her, so that was enough. Again, it was I think strictly a self-interest thing. And of course, you know, one of the things it's hard to know what to bring up, you know, that to tell her, well, you know, I know where she lives. It's about 35 miles from this town. On 2-lane roads and then gravel roads. She gets the mail delivered every day. I think they may have can't stop Saturday delivery, but the mail comes every day. Now, if Trump succeeds in what he wants to do, privatizing the mail service, she's going to be in trouble because she can't afford the prices that FedEx and UPS have. The Postal Service comes every day. But again, it's people can't think in those terms. Somehow it's that self-interest. And again, just not voting for Democrats. And I remember one time I was visiting with a guy, this was years ago, but a good friend of ours, a very, very bright guy. And he was saying, I can't believe I voted for George W. Bush twice. And again, he voted because he just couldn't see himself voting for a Democrat. And he was smart enough to realize that Trump was not for the little guy, little businessman like him. He was for the big guys, and that basically economically, you know, he was doing much worse. And I looked at him and I said, you know, I'd have more sympathy for you, but I'd have the feeling that if you had the chance to vote for George W. Bush again, you would. And he said, you're probably right. So I have had some conversations with people about that, but it's really hard. And I think too many of us live in our little silos where we're not really visiting with people on the other side. But when I did talk to that young farmer, I said, well, why will you vote for Trump? Why did you vote for Trump? Why would you vote for him? And I got an answer that as far as she and her husband were concerned, economically, he'd been okay for farmers in terms of export, their ability to export their grain, I guess, was the deal. But again, I think one of the problems is that I don't tend to know a lot of people. There's one man I know on Facebook, and he's posting such bizarre conspiracy theories stuff that I don't really want to bring it up with him. I won't unfriend him because I think that's just rude. And also, it's interesting to see what he's thinking. But again, you know, the conspiracy theory stuff about COVID and about Biden and all these Democrats running a child sex slavery ring, those kinds of things, I think, okay, it's beyond the pale. I can't deal with this. It's a level of crazy that's just beyond anything I can deal with.
It really is bizarre how that stuff has seemed to have taken hold with some people.
Oh, I know. And this he's not dumb. I think he likes the tough guy talk with Trump. That appeals to him. And he doesn't seem to notice that almost every one of those tough talk things Trump backs down from. He'll make a big thing and then almost, I mean, it's happened so many times I've lost count, but like, I'm going to withhold federal money from this. And then when people tell him that's unconstitutional, he can't do it, he gets pushback even from Republicans. 2 days later, okay, I'm not doing that. I mean, it's happened over and over again. But this guy, I know he likes the tough guy talk, law and order kind of stuff. You know, I think that's what appeals to him, but it distresses me that after 4 years, he hasn't seen through what's actually happening with this guy. And one of the things, I haven't really broached this with too many people, except a psychologist I know, but I really think in Trump in terms of mental health. I mean, I pray for him every day. I have a short list of people who obviously have a narcissistic personality disorder. And I pray for them every day. I mean, 3 of them are people I know. I don't know Donald Trump, but it does seem to me that he exhibits every symptom of that disease. And I think we're all seeing what happens when a person like that who has that disease doesn't get the help he needs, but instead is encouraged and enabled beyond belief. It's quite, it's really quite something. But I really see this in terms of mental health, in terms of his administration. A good lesson for us, you know, if you understand anything about the symptoms and the problem of narcissistic personality disorder and the problems it causes for people around someone like that, we can see it playing out every day. Because the only thing that matters is personal loyalty. And so the Constitution and, you know, anything else just flies out the window. The only thing that matters, everything is personal, and the only thing that matters is people who are loyal to him. There goes the Justice Department. I mean, it's there goes the State Department. There goes the scientists. If they don't agree with him, he shoots him down, and we're all paying the price for that because with the pandemic. I mean, I do hope some people who have been supporting Trump are thinking twice about it, because it's largely because of his inaction and ineptitude that they can't travel to Europe right now. You know, think about that. I mean, it's affecting people in so many ways, and then almost we're closing in on 200,000 deaths. I think it's around 180 now, 180,000 deaths. So it's a great lesson for all of us, but I'm not sure we're learning the lesson. We're learning from it.
Right, right. So what do you think would be, you know, the whole issue of racism, right, has really become more prominent, and I think in some ways a good way that it's waking people up much more than what has been the case, and having people realize that, you know, this is an issue that's been, you know, avoided to some degree for centuries, and maybe we're finally going to deal with it. What?
I think for a lot of people, even myself, I mean, I knew it existed, it was out there, and I think the existence of so many of these videos now, I didn't realize that this was such an ongoing thing, that with so many people affected by it in ways large and small, like being shot when you're unarmed is a major thing, but also being denied access to your own apartment building, have the cops called when you're trying to get into your own apartment building. Or there was a woman, a congresswoman in I think it was Oregon or Washington, the police were called when she was canvassing. She was, you know, running for office. I mean, and I think more and more we're being made aware of how rampant it is and how everyday it is. And I'm hoping, and I don't know, some people say that Trump has made it worse with race baiting, and I think there's some truth to that, but I think it's probably, I think most Black people would tell you it's been there all along. We're just now seeing it a little bit clearer, and I do think that there's some hope in that, because, you know, you just say enough is enough. Eventually, you know, people come to your senses. This is not the right way to be for the community, for the nation.
Right, right. So obviously it's really important for everybody to get out there and vote, but what additional steps would you suggest that people take in order to affect positive change through this election?
I think volunteering, however you can, whether it's, you know, with the election itself, getting people out. I know I have I have some family members who are basically living like most of us in fairly isolated circumstances. Now, there's not much that they can do, but she's sending postcards for the Democratic Party, and she's very impressed with the county she's in. My brother and sister-in-law just moved to this place in California, and they're very impressed with how organized the Democrats are there. And so she is sending postcards every day, and she said it's a no contact thing. The woman emails her and tells her that postcards are ready for her to address and do this, and then she drops them off at the woman's porch and they get out mailed and stuff. But I mean, there, even with the pandemic, there are ways that you can volunteer to support candidates, to support, make people aware of issues, and also things like volunteering for food banks and whoever needs it. I'm kind of frustrated myself now. I have a blood condition now, so I can't donate blood. I can't volunteer for a vaccine trial. I can't volunteer to be a contact tracer, because those are all things I would be glad to do, but I'm just not able to right now. My doctor would kill me if I did. So,
yeah, it's harder to do a lot of different things these days. Volunteering is one of them, but it's good that there are some people that are finding some effective things to be able to do.
Yeah, and well, even with my church, I think I have sent more snail mail in the last 5 months than I have for years. I mean, I've always sent a little bit, but email has seduced me. But we have a number of people in our congregation, elderly, mostly elderly, who are very isolated in their nursing homes and senior care places. And right now they're in lockdown where they can't even eat together in the dining room. They're having meals delivered to them. So the isolation is really terrible for some of these seniors, and some of them are very gregarious people. It's difficult. A couple of them, some church members have been able to get them on Zoom. So they gather with us on Sunday. But a lot of them don't have access to computers, that never learned how to use them. So that's one of my things from the prayer chain is I have about, I guess, between 5 and 10 people that get regular cards from me, just contact, because that's about the only way. And they can phone me too, or I can phone them, but I think they love getting the mail. And I sometimes get responses, and they're telling me that they really love getting the notes and things. So that's a very basic, simple thing to do. But I think right now, any form of communication that we can have with other people is a blessing. It really helps.
So what kind of suggestions do you have for religious leaders? What should they be saying and doing leading up to the election?
Well, our priest at this little Episcopal church did a marvelous sermon after John Lewis died, and basically talking about his role in history, in American history. And she's younger than I am, but she obviously had read a lot of his writings and things. And I think sharing information about heroes like that is important, because she was speaking of him as a man of faith. It wasn't a strictly political sermon about this or that. It was about a man of faith and what his faith had led him to, had called him to do. And the kind of good trouble that Christians have been getting into ever since, the time of Christ. So I think being aware, helping people, focus not just on their own spiritual lives, but what we can do as a church community, as a city, as a nation, to bring people hope, a realistic hope, not the kind of stuff that narcissists, who are thinking magically, will spew forth, but realistic hope that we can change things for the better.
So just to finish up, if you had one thing that you would hope for in terms of an overall outcome from the election, what would it be?
I think to persevere, to realize that it's not about me, it's about all of us, and to persevere in trying to make things better for all of us. Maybe that's, because you know, it's obviously a very difficult time. Like my little 6-year-old grandniece says the world doesn't make sense anymore, and she nailed it. I mean, you know, she said when she realized that her grandparents, her beloved grandparents that she saw every day, couldn't come visit her because it was dangerous. We said the world doesn't make sense anymore. She was quite indignant. So even though the world doesn't make sense, I think to hold on to hope and to persevere in trying to make the connections we need to keep going. That's important.
Yep, couldn't agree more, Kathleen. Very wise words. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you spending some time. It's always great to see you, always great to speak with you. Appreciate it, Kathleen.
Thank you.